A pregnant bride walks down the aisle, ready to marry the man she loves, only to expose his betrayal with a secret recording that stuns the entire church. What follows isn't heartbreak, it's a powerful rise. This is the story of how one woman chose herself, her child, and her freedom over lies. Where are you watching from? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that prove strength always finds its voice. They say you remember the quiet moments more than the noisy ones. That night, my last night as someone's fiancé, I remember the sound of the fan spinning above me. Slow, steady, like it wasn't in a rush to go anywhere. The kind of silence that presses gently against your chest like a question waiting to be answered. I sat at the edge of my childhood bed, the mattress older than I was, softened by time and sleepovers and late-night tears. My hands rested on my belly, tracing slow, soothing circles. She kicked once, just enough to remind me she was there. I smiled at her presence, my little heartbeat, my reason, everything I had fought for, waited for. I was 32, and for the first time in years, I thought I had found peace. Darius had walked into my life like a well-rehearsed actor, charming, thoughtful, the kind of man who knew just how to touch the small of your back in public without making it a show. He was 35, confident in a way that made people listen. He quoted Maya Angelou in the same breath as real estate trends. I didn't fall in love immediately. I had grown cautious, as women who've been burned often do. But he peeled away my hesitation layer by layer. Midnight talks, long walks, patient silence when I needed it. He was the only man who rubbed my feet without being asked, who held my hair while I vomited through the first trimester and still kissed my forehead like I was a miracle. He called me my center, told me that this baby changed everything for him, that he was ready to be the man I deserved. And tomorrow, we were getting married. The house was alive with noise. Aunt Clara was blasting gospel music through a Bluetooth speaker that kept cutting out. My younger cousins were racing through the hallway, one of them shrieking about who stole the last bottle of apple juice. Out in the backyard, the sweet smell of fried chicken and grilled peppers wafted through the screen door. Someone was arguing over table assignments, and someone else was looking for the sewing kit like it was a matter of national emergency. But inside my room, the chaos sounded far away, like it belonged to another universe. My white veil hung neatly on the closet door, next to the ivory silk gown that Monica had helped me choose 6 weeks ago. She'd insisted I go with the dress that made me look like a queen who knew her own worth. She'd meant it, I think. Back then, the door creaked open, and I didn't even have to turn around. Monica never knocked. "You just gonna sit here all night, Zell?" she said, already chewing gum as she plopped beside me. "Come on, it's your last night as a single woman. Shouldn't you be doing something, bridey?" I gave her a tired smile. "Like what? Play dress up in the veil? I'm 8 months pregnant, Mon. My ankles have retired." She rolled her eyes and reached for the gold wristwatch I'd placed in a small paper bag on the nightstand. "At least give this to Darius yourself. You got him something beautiful. Don't you want to be the one to put it on his wrist? He's staying at the Carlton tonight, right? Swing by. Write him a little note. Surprise him." I hesitated. I was too tired to argue, but something in my gut said I should stay. "Feels a little awkward showing up unannounced, don't you think?" Monica raised an eyebrow. "Girl, if anyone has the right to knock on that man's hotel room tonight, it's you. You're carrying his child. He's marrying you tomorrow. Don't overthink it. Just go." I looked at her closely. She was trying too hard to sound casual. Her lipstick was too perfect, her dress too tight for someone just hanging out with family. But I didn't question it then. I trusted her. "Okay," I said finally, standing up and stretching carefully. "But I'm not staying long." She beamed, all teeth. "That's my girl." The Carlton wasn't far, just 10 minutes from my parents' house, nestled beside a quiet bank and glowing softly under the evening sky. I asked the Uber driver to leave the engine running. I didn't plan to stay longer than 10 minutes. Inside the paper bag was the watch, wrapped in white tissue paper, and a folded note I'd written after my last prenatal visit. "For every time you held my hand when I was scared, for every time you kissed my stomach and called her our little light, I love you, always, Sel." I stepped into the lobby, greeted by soft jazz and even softer lighting. A young woman at the reception desk looked up and smiled. I returned it with a tired nod. "Hi," I said, voice gentle. "I'm looking for Mr. Darius Cole. He checked in earlier today?" She typed quickly, then glanced up. "Yes, ma'am, he did check in." She hesitated. "He's not alone." I blinked. "Sorry?" Her voice lowered. "His reservation said no interruptions. He arrived with a guest, a woman." The words didn't register at first. A woman. Could have been a friend, a sister, the wedding planner, anyone. "Thank you," I said with a tight smile. My feet carried me toward the elevator before my brain gave them permission. As the doors closed, I stared at my reflection. I looked calm, too calm. My hands trembled slightly, but my face held. I'd learned how to hold things in. Years of practice. The hallway was carpeted in burgundy. Room 714 was near the end. I heard laughter, then voices, then silence, then moaning. The watch ticked faintly in my hand. My heart pounded louder. But I wasn't ready to break. Not yet. Not before I knew exactly who he was behind the smile. I leaned in closer, and what I heard changed everything. I pressed my ear to the door of room 714. The world narrowed into one long breath I didn't know I was holding. The first sound was her laughter, soft, flirty, like a secret being told in pieces. Then, his voice. I'd heard Darius speak in boardrooms on FaceTime to strangers and elders and children, but I had never heard this version of him. This voice was lighter, looser, wicked. "She's too emotional these days," he said, and I knew the moment he spoke it was about me. Always talking about baby names and nursery paint like it means something. I'm only marrying her because of the baby. Once it's born, I'll have control of everything. The woman laughed again. "You're so bad, Darius," he chuckled. "She thinks this is love. But without that baby, she's just ordinary. Trust me, after the vows, it'll be my house, my rules. She won't even know what hit her." I should have collapsed, should have screamed, but my body didn't move. I stood there, frozen in the dim hallway, the velvet carpet beneath my sandals feeling more like quicksand. My hand instinctively went to my stomach. My daughter kicked lightly, as if reminding me, "I'm here. I'm listening too." My other hand reached into my purse. Slowly, like I was performing a ritual, I pulled out my phone, opened the recorder, and pressed start. I held it close to the door, capturing every sigh, every cruel laugh, every confirmation that the man I was about to marry, the man I trusted with my future, was mocking me in bed with someone else. I didn't let myself cry. Not then, not there. My heart was howling, but I caged it behind my ribs. I stood like a statue for 6 full minutes, catching every word. I mean, she's got that soft little smile and that yes dear vibe, but it's all an act. She's trying to trap me with this baby, thinking I'll become some doting husband. Nah, she's the one trapped, she just doesn't know it yet. More laughter. Kissing sounds. The unmistakable creak of a hotel mattress. Then more moaning. I ended the recording. I backed away from the door slowly, careful not to let my sandals squeak or catch on the carpet. My legs felt like hollow branches, barely carrying me to the elevator. I stepped inside and turned to face the shiny doors. My reflection stared back, pale, still, too quiet. I didn't recognize her. Back in the lobby, I walked straight out. The doorman opened the glass door for me and said, "Good night, ma'am," like nothing in the world had happened. The air outside was thick with early summer heat. My skin felt damp, but I couldn't feel anything. I climbed into the Uber without a word. The driver glanced at me through the mirror. "You okay, miss?" I nodded, almost mechanically. "Please take me to the closest 24-hour pharmacy." He didn't ask why, just drove. Inside the pharmacy, under the humming lights, I bought a small pack of tissues, a bottle of water, and a 128GB memory card. I transferred the recording onto it in the back seat of the car, hands shaking but deliberate. Then I emailed a backup to myself. Then I emailed it to my godfather just in case something happened to me. My reflection in the car window looked older, like I'd aged 10 years in an hour. I sat quietly, pressing the water bottle to my lips but not drinking. The driver was kind. He didn't rush me, didn't speak. Eventually I whispered to myself, "I am not the fool you think I am, Darius." I meant it. I could have gone home. Back to the noise, to the satin pillowcases and scented candles, to the mothers and aunties and cousins dancing to high-life music in the living room. But I didn't. Instead, I asked the driver to circle the neighborhood once. I needed the movement, the rhythm of tires on asphalt, to remind me that time hadn't frozen. I thought of the watch still inside the paper bag, the one I bought with 2 weeks' salary saved from freelance clients. I had chosen the exact inscription with care. For every second you've made me feel safe. What irony. I thought of the letter, the tenderness in it, the vulnerability. How foolish it seemed now, how unguarded. He never deserved those words. When I finally got home, I slipped in through the back door. The house was still loud, plates clinking, someone singing off-key in the kitchen, laughter spilling down the hallway. No one noticed me. I went straight to the guest room, locked the door, and collapsed onto the edge of the bed. My fingers hovered over the play button on the audio file. I hesitated, then pressed it. I listened to it again. All 6 minutes. His voice, her giggle, the betrayal, the plan. Then I played it a second time and a third. By the fourth play, I wasn't crying. I was planning. I opened my notepad, started writing a list. Not a guest list, not a bridal checklist, a witness list. People who would be at the wedding. People I wanted to hear the truth. Not in whispers, not in rumor, but in surround sound. I wrote my uncle's name first, then my father, then my childhood pastor. I wrote my maid of honor's name and circled it, Monica. My cousin, the woman laughing in that hotel room. I wrote Monica again, this time with an asterisk. I didn't know how I'd do it yet, but I knew I wouldn't cry in front of them. I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't rage. I would show them, and I would show him. I sat in the dark, listening to the creaks of the old house, the soft steps of people who still believed the wedding was real. And maybe it still was. But it wouldn't end how they thought. When sleep finally came, it wasn't peaceful, but it was deep. Like falling into a cold lake and letting it swallow you whole. When I woke up hours later, the sun had just started to rise, casting gold across the floor. Today was my wedding day, and I was ready for war. I rose with the sun. Not because I was excited, not because the wedding jitters had finally caught up with me. No, I rose because sleep had done its part, and now it was time for me to do mine. The house was already alive again. Gospel music poured from the kitchen speakers. Someone knocked over a bottle of hair gel in the hallway. Aunt Diane yelled something about the ribbon colors not matching the tablecloths. From the outside, it looked like joy. But inside me? A storm was forming, quiet, focused, and far past the point of turning back. I didn't go downstairs. I didn't join the others in their buzz of excitement. Instead, I slipped into the guest room, locked the door behind me, and picked up my phone. My fingers hovered for a moment before I dialed. "Uncle David?" I said as soon as he answered, his familiar deep voice cracking through the line. "Celeste? Is everything all right?" "No, sir. I need your help. I need you to pull your investment from Darius's firm. Today." There was a pause. "The wedding is this afternoon." "I know. That's why I'm asking now. Please, don't ask questions. I'll explain everything later." He paused again, and I could practically hear the gears turning on his end. "Did he do something?" My jaw tightened. "Yes." That was all I could say without unraveling. "I'll take care of it," he said softly. "Are you safe?" "I am now." "Then I'm proud of you." I ended the call and let the silence settle for a beat. Then I made the next one, to my lawyer. "Barrister O'Con?" I said when his cheery voice picked up. "I need the marriage license withdrawn. Officially. I don't want anything on paper that says Darius and I are married. Not even for a second." There was a sharp pause on the line. "Wait. What? Celeste, are you sure?" "I've never been more sure in my life. I'll pay the cancellation fee, file the paperwork, whatever it takes. Just make sure that license is invalid today." His voice softened. "Understood? I'll call the registrar's office before they even open. You'll get a confirmation text soon." "Thank you," I whispered. "Please don't mess this up." "I won't." I hung up, set the phone down, and took a deep breath that rattled through my ribs. I looked over at the dress bag hanging on the closet door. The ivory silk gown still shimmered in the morning light, but it no longer looked like a symbol of hope. It looked like armor. There was a knock on my door, a gentle one this time. "It's me," Monica called. "I brought you some jollof rice. You skipped dinner." I opened the door, and she stepped in with 2 small plates, wearing a wide smile and too much perfume. Her gold bridesmaid dress clung a little too confidently to her body. She looked at me the way someone looks at a candle right before they blow it out. Too sweet, too calm. "You okay?" she asked, placing the plates on the side table. "You look tired." "I didn't sleep much," I replied. "Nerves, huh?" She laughed, a bit too high-pitched. Big day, but I saw your dress hanging. Girl, you're gonna look like royalty. I studied her face, the way her eyes danced around the room, avoiding mine, the way her fingers trembled slightly as she picked up a bracelet from my table and slipped it on her wrist like it belonged to her. You wish you were in my shoes, don't you? I asked softly. She froze for just a second. Then she laughed again. What? No. What are you talking about? Darius is a real catch, I said, not breaking my gaze. Handsome, successful, loyal. Her smile faltered. Of course. I mean, he loves you. That's what matters. I stood. Thanks for the food. I need to rest. She didn't argue, just gave me a quick, nervous smile and hurried out of the room. I watched the door close behind her and locked it again. Back at the vanity, I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were sharper today, my cheeks a little hollower. My lips were pressed into a line so tight it hurt. You're almost there, I whispered. Later that afternoon, Darius called. I let it ring twice before answering. Baby, he said with that silk-slick voice, I've been trying to reach you. How are you feeling? I'm fine, I replied, calm as a still pond. You didn't answer earlier. I was with family. Can't wait to see you walk down that aisle tomorrow, he said. I couldn't sleep last night just thinking about you and our baby. I let the silence stretch for a beat. You didn't sleep? I asked. Not really, he chuckled. Too excited? We're really doing this, huh? Yes, we are. He sounded relieved. That's my girl. I've already spoken to the photographer. Drone shots will start at 11, first dance right after pastor's prayer. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. I believe you. You sound serious, he said. Are we good? We're perfect. He exhaled like he'd been holding in a storm. That's what I like to hear. We ended the call. I stared at my reflection again, this time smiling, not with joy, but with purpose. Then I began writing. Names. Faces. People who would be sitting in the church pews tomorrow. People who had told me love was about sacrifice. People who thought they were coming to witness a fairy tale. They would be the witnesses to something else. My father came in just before sunset. He held a small white Bible and smiled gently. My daughter, he said, let me pray with you. I stood and took his hands. They were warm, calloused from years of work, but always steady. Father, he prayed, may this marriage be filled with peace, love, and loyalty. I squeezed his hands tighter but said nothing. When he finished, I opened my eyes and whispered, Amen. But inside, I prayed a different prayer. Let the truth be louder than his lies. That night, while the house slept, I sat alone and stared at the bouquet on my desk. I reached into the small drawer and pulled out the tiny Bluetooth audio transmitter. I tested it with my phone and heard the speaker crackle softly. 30 seconds. That's all I'd need. I slid the transmitter into the bouquet, hidden among silk roses and baby's breath, and tucked it beneath the ribbon. My hands didn't shake. Not this time, because tomorrow I would walk down the aisle, and they would all hear the truth. The morning of the wedding arrived with sunlit calm, as if the world had no idea what was about to unfold. Birds chirped in the mango tree outside my window. Aunt Clara's gospel playlist echoed through the yard again, but this time it didn't pierce my nerves. It rolled over me like a distant wave. I sat still as the makeup artist brushed powder over my cheekbones, humming to herself while I stared at my reflection. I looked like a bride, serene, glowing, flawless. But beneath the veil of beauty, I was armored. Every breath was a countdown. You're so calm, the makeup artist said, pausing to dab gently at the corner of my eye. Most brides are shaking by now. I'm ready, I answered, and I meant it. My gown lay stretched across the bed like a sleeping secret, ivory silk, soft and heavy. It had once symbolized the beginning of forever. Now it was the uniform of a soldier going to war. My phone buzzed beside me. I picked it up slowly. Barrister Ocon. License canceled. Officially withdrawn. No valid marriage can take place today. Good luck. A quiet smile curved my lips. Not a triumphant one. Not angry. Just settled. I set the phone down and touched the bouquet resting in its box. The transmitter was still in place, tucked between the petals, snug beneath the satin ribbon. Downstairs, I heard Darius laughing. I rose and moved to the window. There he was, outside the church gates, dressed in a burgundy suit that caught the morning light perfectly. Clean shave, polished shoes, one hand on his phone, the other shaking hands with guests. He was grinning like a king awaiting his throne. A few of his friends clapped him on the back. Today is your day, man, one of them said. You pulled a good one. Celeste is top tier, another added. God really smiled on you. Darius laughed deeply. I told y'all, when a man knows what he wants, he makes it happen. Monica stood not far behind him, pretending to photograph the altar decorations, her phone tilted conveniently toward him every few minutes. Her gold bridesmaid dress shimmered with self-importance. She wore it like a trophy. She bit her lower lip once, glancing at him. He looked away, but she smiled to herself, proud and unrepentant. She thought no one knew. She thought she had won. Meanwhile, in the car parked just outside the church, I sat in silence beside my father. The air conditioner hummed low, and my veil fluttered lightly over my cheek. You ready, my daughter? He asked, adjusting the cuff of his shirt. I turned to him slowly, calm as still water. Yes, Daddy, I'm ready. The door opened, cameras clicked, children screamed, the bride is here. The hush that fell over the crowd was instant. I stepped out and felt the air shift. Every head turned, every breath paused. They were all watching me, expecting love, romance, union. They would soon witness something else entirely. My dress floated as I walked, the silk whispering with every step. My bouquet rested in my hands, its weight heavier than it looked. Not because of the flowers, but because of the truth it carried. I didn't smile, I didn't wave, I didn't look left or right. I just moved forward, deliberate and focused. Inside, the church was a postcard of perfection. White roses lined the aisle, pink ribbons tied to pews, golden arches framing the altar. A large banner stretched above the choir loft. Welcome to the wedding of Celeste and Darius. The pastor stood by the pulpit, Bible in hand. The guests were already seated, fans waving slowly in the heat. Darius stood at the altar, chest out, face glowing. When he saw me, his eyes lit up with relief. She came, he whispered to his best man. I was starting to think she'd changed her mind. You're lucky, bro, his friend replied. Not every woman would carry your child and still look that good. I heard it. All of it. I walked up to the altar and took my place beside him. He reached for my hand, but I didn't offer it. He didn't notice. He was too busy grinning for the crowd. The pastor cleared his throat and lifted the microphone. Good morning, beloved, he began. Today is a special day. A day when two hearts become one. A day where love wins. My heart beat like a drum. My fingers tightened around the bouquet. The transmitter's button was right beneath my thumb. The pastor turned to Darius. Groom, your vows, please. Darius smiled, took the mic, and stepped forward. Celeste, he began, his voice smooth as honey. From the moment I met you, I knew you were different. You brought light into my life. You brought purpose. He turned slightly toward me. You carry our child, and with every day you carry more of my heart. I vow to love you, protect you, and walk beside you forever. Applause filled the room. A few people dabbed their eyes. Monica smiled from the front row, her phone discreetly recording. Darius handed the mic back to the pastor, who nodded and turned to me. Bride, your vows, please. I didn't speak. Not yet. Instead, I slowly reached down, pressed the button hidden in the bouquet, and stepped back. The sound system crackled. A hush swept over the room. Then the recording began. Darius's voice echoed through the speakers. She's too emotional these days. I'm only marrying her because of the baby. Once it's born, I'll control everything. A gasp. Another voice. You're wicked. Laughter. Moaning. The rhythm of betrayal broadcast through every speaker in the church. People turned wide-eyed, some covered their mouths, one woman fainted. Darius stood frozen. Turn it off, someone shouted. But I stepped forward, eyes calm. No, I said. Let it finish. The recording played on, cruelty layered in intimacy, deception wrapped in giggles. When it finally ended, the silence in the room was louder than any scream. I raised the microphone. This, I said softly, is what happened last night while I was home, praying for today. This is what my groom was doing at the Carlton Hotel, room 714. All eyes shifted to Darius. His face had gone ghost white. It's not what you think, he stammered. Not what I think, I said. You mocked me. You laughed about using me. You treated me like a pawn. He reached out. Celeste, don't touch me. I turned to the front row. And if anyone is wondering who the other woman is, I pointed. Say hello to Monica. My cousin, my bridesmaid, my betrayal. The church exploded, gasps, cries, cell phones raised again. Monica tried to slip away, but her legs buckled. She sank into her seat, eyes wide with shame. I removed the veil from my head and let it fall to the floor. I came here today to marry a man I thought loved me. Instead, I found the truth just in time. I took off the ring, dropped it on the ground, stepped over it. I won't cry today. I won't run. I will walk out of here with my head high and raise my daughter in peace. And then I turned. The choir looked stunned. I met their gaze. Sing, I said. Not for a wedding. Sing for freedom. And I walked, one step at a time, down the aisle lined with roses and shattered expectations. Behind me, the voices began to rise, first soft, then louder. A slow clap began, then another. Applause followed me out like a tide. Outside, the sun kissed my face. My bouquet hung loosely at my side. My baby kicked once, gently, and I finally smiled. The moment the sunlight touched my skin outside the church doors, it felt like shedding a skin I never asked to wear. I didn't look back. Not once. I walked down those steps like a woman returning to herself, bouquet still in hand, dress flowing behind me like a banner of quiet rebellion. People moved aside as I passed, some too stunned to speak, others too moved to breathe. Behind me, the choir sang, not for love, but for liberation. The notes rose softly at first, then swelled with a kind of reverence. It wasn't the song we rehearsed, but it was the one I needed. I stood under the blazing sky, lifting the hem of my dress so it wouldn't drag across the gravel. My heart beat steady now, like it had finally remembered its rhythm. I was no longer holding my breath. The church exploded behind me, not literally, but emotionally. People poured out in waves, whispering, gasping, clutching their pearls like they'd just witnessed the second coming. Some looked at me with pity, others with awe. I didn't need either. An older woman from my father's church approached me cautiously, her hand over her heart. "My child," she said gently, "are you all right?" I met her eyes and nodded. "I will be." "What happened inside?" she began, but someone behind her interrupted. "The wedding's off," another woman whispered, barely containing her shock. "She exposed him. He was sleeping with her cousin." Gasps spread like wildfire. Phones were out. Texts were flying before I'd even finished blinking. People who hadn't even made it into the church were now running back to their cars, calling relatives, updating group chats. Inside, Darius was still standing at the altar, pale and motionless. His hands trembled. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Pastor Mendez sat down slowly, still holding the microphone like it weighed 50 pounds. He stared into the distance as though trying to make sense of what had just happened. Darius's mother, Mrs. Cole, stormed down the aisle and reached him first. "Darius," she hissed, "what is this nonsense? Is it true?" He blinked at her, too stunned to lie. "Mom," she slapped his arm. "You don't know what she's talking about. We all heard the recording, your voice, your disgusting laugh. Are you mad? Mom, please? You disgraced this family. A pregnant bride and your cousin-in-law? Are you insane?" I didn't see it with my own eyes, but I heard about it seconds later. Word moved faster than air in that room. Pastor Mendez lowered his head and whispered a prayer, his first wedding ever interrupted by betrayal. One of the church elders leaned in and asked, "Pastor, what do we do?" He looked up with tears in his eyes. "We pray." Meanwhile, Monica tried to escape. She ducked out the side aisle, head bowed, heels clicking in rapid succession. But two women from the choir stepped directly in her path, arms folded. "You're not going anywhere," one of them said flatly. "After what you did, you think you can just walk out like nothing happened?" Monica's voice shook. "Please, I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean what?" the other snapped. "To sleep with your cousin's fiancé? In a hotel room the night before her wedding?" Monica was cornered. Other guests had surrounded her. Some shouted, others recorded, faces lit up by their screens. She started to cry. The kind of cry that sounds like panic, not remorse. She clutched her clutch bag like it could protect her from the weight of her choices. Outside, my father found me and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "My daughter," he said, voice trembling with something between pride and worry, "let's go home." I didn't move. "I'm not done yet," I said, calm but firm. He looked confused. "What more is there? You said everything. You walked away." I shook my head slowly. "There's one more thing." Without waiting for a response, I turned and began walking back toward the church. The crowd parted for me like a tide for a ship. No one dared stop me. Inside, the atmosphere had frozen over. Darius turned at the sound of my steps, his eyes wide and red. He tried to reach for me again, but I raised my hand to stop him. "Pastor," I said, facing the pulpit. "May I speak one more time?" Pastor Mendez handed me the mic, his fingers shaking. I turned to the crowd, my voice clear and grounded. I want to say something, not just for me but for every woman who's ever been lied to, for every woman who carried a man's child while he carried secrets, for every woman who believed in love and received betrayal. I turned to Darius. I gave you everything, my trust, my body, my time, and now this child. I defended you when others doubted you, and still you laughed behind my back with another woman. His jaw trembled. I could tell he wanted to speak, but I wasn't finished. I turned again to face the room. I will not cry. Not today, not here. Today I choose myself. And then my eyes landed on Monica, still seated, still ashamed. Blood should protect, I said, not betray. You weren't just my cousin, you were my friend, my sister. And you knew everything. Still, you did this. The room was silent. The weight of those words settled like dust on every shoulder. I turned back to the pastor and bowed my head respectfully. This wedding cannot continue. He nodded once. It is your right. I placed one hand on my belly and looked straight into the nearest camera. I may walk out of here alone, I said softly, but I walk out whole, not broken, not ashamed. I am still a bride, just not to a liar. I handed back the mic and walked. This time, the crowd rose in full. The applause was not hesitant. It thundered through the church. A few women wept openly. Others clapped until their palms stung. Even the choir began singing softly as I passed, voices swelling with something holy. Outside, the air welcomed me like an old friend. My face remained calm, but inside, I felt the crack of something breaking free. Something old, something afraid, something I didn't need anymore. Freedom didn't look like I thought it would. It didn't have a ribbon or a cake or a kiss at the altar. Freedom looked like me, walking and never looking back. The day after the wedding that never was, I woke up in my own bed. Not in a honeymoon suite, not in white silk sheets embroidered with our initials, not to breakfast in bed or a good morning, Mrs. Cole. I woke up to silence. No ribbon-strewn hallways, no aunties arguing over leftover jollof, no decorators cleaning flower petals off the floor, just silence. And my baby's soft kick beneath my palm. My dress hung on the back of the chair like a memory I had no intention of keeping. My veil lay crumpled by the dresser. The bouquet with its secret weapon of truth had been taken apart and thrown away. I had walked out of my wedding, and the world now knew it. My phone was lit up like a Christmas tree. 15 missed calls from Darius, 17 from Monica, dozens of messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. But what caught my breath wasn't a call. It was a notification. A video clip, just over 2 minutes long, of me at the altar, holding the mic in one hand, telling the world what happened in room 714. It had already surpassed 200,000 views. The comments poured in like a river that wouldn't stop flowing. This woman is a hero. She said what most of us only dream of saying. Room 714, we will never forget. I scrolled in silence, unsure whether to laugh or cry. But one thing was clear. I felt peace. Not vengeance, not satisfaction, just peace. Across town, Darius sat in a dim hotel room with the curtains drawn and his phone face down. He hadn't eaten. His eyes were red, swollen from the kind of sleepless night that even guilt can't justify. The message from his lawyer had come early. Your primary investor has officially pulled out. The accounts are frozen. We need to meet. He hadn't responded. He hadn't responded to Monica either, who had been texting him nonstop. Please call me. I'm suffering too. Don't leave me in this mess. He said nothing. He sat there, the walls of his perfect life crumbling inward. Meanwhile, back at home, I was sitting on the couch with my father when I got a call from Uncle David. I've spoken to my people, he said. The funds have been withdrawn. Darius will feel it in 2 days. I closed my eyes and exhaled. Thank you. I'm proud of you, he added. You did what most women are afraid to do. I nodded. I had no choice. No, he said firmly. You did, and you chose yourself. I ended the call, and for a moment just sat still, letting his words settle into my bones. Later that evening, I pulled the old wedding invitation from the fridge where it had been magneted for months. The union of Celeste Martin and Darius Cole. I tore it in half and dropped it into the trash. No rage, no ceremony, just release. The next morning, I opened my blog account, which had mostly sat dormant during the wedding planning. I typed, I wore a white dress. I walked the aisle. But I didn't marry shame. I walked away. and that was the best decision of my life. I called the blog The Bride Who Walked. Within hours, stories began pouring in from other women, some from other states, some anonymous, some barely legible between lines of pain. And each one made me feel less alone. One message came from a woman named Nosi. I've been in a marriage full of betrayal for years. Yesterday, I watched your video while packing. Today I walked out. Thank you for reminding me that I still matter. I read it twice, then 3 times, and whispered to myself, maybe that's why it happened. The next day, I visited my OB/GYN. The nurse greeted me with a wide smile. Your baby's heartbeat is strong, she said, placing the Doppler gently on my belly. She's growing beautifully. I smiled too. So am I. On the way out, a woman in the hallway stopped me. Are you Celeste? She asked. Yes. She hugged me without another word. I didn't know her, but I knew what that hug meant. Thank you. At home, I sat at the dining table with my laptop, writing letter after letter to women who had sent me messages. I printed some out, signed each one, and mailed them. I wasn't just replying, I was reaching. One day, a message came from a 17-year-old girl named Peace. My uncle's been hurting me. I was too scared to tell anyone. But after I read your story, I told my aunt. She took me away. Thank you for giving me the push. I dropped the phone and cried. For the girl I once was. For the girl she still was. For all the girls no one listened to. Days passed, then weeks. One night, Darius showed up at my gate with no flowers, no entourage, just a pleading look and tired shoes. The gatekeeper followed protocol. She said, if you ever come here, I'm not to open the gate. He stood there for over an hour, leaning against the iron bars like a man locked out of his own life. Eventually, he dropped a note. I watched him walk away on the security camera. Too late. My mother started bringing me tea again, the way she used to when I was in college and broken-hearted over some boy who said the wrong thing at the wrong time. You don't have to bring me food, Mama, I told her. I know, she said, placing the tray down. But it gives me joy to feed you, and you need your strength more than ever. We sat together in silence for a while. Have you spoken to him since? She finally asked. No, I blocked him. Good, she said. When I found out your father was speaking to another woman during our first year of marriage, I didn't leave. I smiled in front of everyone, but I was dying inside. I stayed for appearances. I won't let my daughter do the same. I looked down, blinking back something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in days. It still hurts. It will, she said, her voice soft. But pain is like labor. It feels like death. And then there's life. I smiled faintly. She kissed my forehead. Let it pass. The joy is coming. And deep down, I believed her. Because while I hadn't married a man that day, I had birthed something stronger than any vow, self-respect. And I would raise it, just like I would raise my daughter, with both hands open and a heart that refused to stay broken. I named her Amare. It means grace in an old tongue, though I didn't need a translation to know what she was. She was the blessing that rose from the ashes. The one good thing that bloomed from a day that was supposed to ruin me. She arrived on a stormy night, the kind where thunder rattled the windows and rain whispered against the roof like an omen. I was folding towels in my room when the first pain struck, sharp, sudden, undeniable. I gripped the back of the chair, breath catching in my throat. My mother was in the hallway. She rushed in before I even called her. It's time, I whispered. She didn't panic. She'd done this before. She called my father, grabbed the go bag we'd packed 2 weeks ago, and wrapped me in a thick scarf to shield me from the cold outside. We drove fast through rain-slicked streets. My father held my hand the whole way, his palm warm, thumb brushing over my knuckles like a silent chant. You're strong, he kept saying. You're strong. At the hospital, nurses wheeled me into the delivery room. The lights above were too bright. The bed felt too cold, but inside I was steady. I had already survived a different kind of pain. Breathe, Celeste, one nurse said, rubbing my arm. Her name was B, and her eyes were kind. You're doing great, just a little more. And then after hours that felt like decades, after tears and sweat and groaned prayers to a God who had never left me, she arrived, tiny, pink, full of sound and fury. It's a girl, B said. I cried then. Not the broken kind, the kind that heals you. When they placed her in my arms, her eyes blinked open, squinting like she had questions. Her fist clenched tightly around my finger as if to say, I'm here now. We've made it, and we had. Word spread quickly. Celeste gave birth, traveled from group chat to newsfeed to inbox. A few guests from the wedding sent flowers. Pastor Mendez sent a card. My old neighbor dropped off a blanket she'd sewn by hand. The world still watched me, but this time, it felt like they were watching me rise, not break. 1 week later, I was nursing Amare beneath the tree in our compound when my father walked over with the morning paper. "You made the front page again," he said, sitting beside me. I looked down at the headline, "From Broken Bride to Bold Mother, the story of Celeste and baby Amare." I laughed, rocking her gently. "They'll get tired of me eventually." "They won't," he replied. "Not when they're watching a queen rise." I kept writing. Not just blogs now, but longer letters. Women from across the country reached out, some broken, some angry, all tired. They wanted to talk to someone who had walked the fire and lived. I didn't have answers, but I had honesty, and they trusted that more than anything. My blog, The Bride Who Walked, became a sanctuary. And somehow, what had started as a single act of rebellion turned into a movement. One afternoon, a girl barely 17 showed up at our office. She was barefoot, her dress oversized, a baby strapped to her chest. Her eyes were dry but too quiet. "I don't know where else to go," she said. I reached for her hand without hesitation. "You already came to the right place." She collapsed into my arms and sobbed. And I knew then that this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every girl who had ever been silenced in a hallway. Every woman who had smiled through a betrayal, every mother who had been made to feel ashamed for choosing herself. At night, I would sit by Amare's crib, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. I whispered to her, "You are not a mistake. You are the reason I didn't stay small. You are the reason I chose to fight." Udu, my best friend, came over one evening with 2 big bags of baby gifts. "I know you said no presents," she said, "but don't yell at me. I couldn't help it." "You're going to spoil her," I teased. "She deserves it. So do you." We sat on the couch, surrounded by baby socks and diapers and tiny rattles. "Are you scared?" Udu asked quietly. I paused, my hand resting on Amare's sleeping form. "A little," I admitted. "But I'm ready." "And her name?" she asked, smiling. "Amare." Udu blinked. "God's grace," I nodded. "That's what she is." Later that week, I was invited to speak at a local women's center. It wasn't glamorous, plastic chairs, standing fans, a cracked microphone. But the room was full, some young, some older, a few with babies in their laps just like mine. I stood before them in a simple blue dress, Amare asleep against my chest in a sling. "I'm not here because I'm perfect," I said. "I'm here because I broke and stood again." Silence, then slow nods. "I believed love was enough," I continued. "I thought loyalty meant safety, but I forgot to believe in myself." A few women began to cry. I walked the aisle, but I walked away. Because peace is better than a performance, and dignity is better than any diamond. Applause followed me off the stage. I didn't feel like a speaker, I felt like a survivor. That night, back home, my father watched a clip of the event on his phone. He chuckled. "My daughter's becoming a public figure," he said to his friend Mr. Emmanuel. "She deserves it," Mr. Emmanuel replied. "She did what no one expected. She exposed him and walked out like a queen." But my father looked worried. "I just hope it doesn't become too much. Has Darius tried to reach her again?" He shook his head. "And if he does, I'll be the one waiting at the gate." Across town, Darius sat alone in a dark office. Most of the staff had quit. His assistant left without notice. Clients had pulled out. The sign that once read Cole & Co. Solutions now hung lopsided, one corner barely clinging to the wall. A knock came at the door. "They took the delivery van," someone said. Darius nodded. "Which one?" "The Toyota. The leasing company reclaimed it." He sighed and slumped into his chair. "You ruined everything," the man said quietly. "We were building something real, and you let ego burn it down." Darius didn't reply. He didn't need to. Everything was already gone, and me and my daughter, we were just beginning. 2 months had passed since I walked out of the church with my head high and my heart unchained. In that short time, the story of the bride who exposed her groom at the altar had faded from the headlines, but not from people's hearts. I was no longer just Celeste Martin. I was the woman who chose herself. With help from Uncle David and a few kind-hearted women who believed in the cause, I opened a small office in the city center. Nothing fancy, just a clean space with white walls, 3 chairs, a battered wooden desk, and a hand-painted banner that read, "You are not weak. You are walking away from what was never yours." Women started coming, quietly at first, some too scared to give their names, others clutching babies or legal documents or nothing at all. They didn't come for advice, they came to be heard, to be seen, to find someone who wouldn't tell them to pray it away or stay for the kids. I never told them what to do, I just listened, and sometimes I told my story too, if it helped. One afternoon, the door creaked open and a young girl stepped in. She couldn't have been more than 18. She wore slippers that were too big for her feet and carried a baby who looked barely 6 months old. Her eyes were hollow, her body stiff, like she was bracing for a door to slam in her face. "I don't know where to go," she whispered. I stood, smiled softly, and reached out my hand. "You've already found it." She collapsed into my arms and sobbed until the baby stirred. And that's when I knew. This space was no longer about me. It was about every woman who had nowhere else to turn. At home, Amare had grown into a radiant ball of curiosity. She was always reaching, always grabbing at light, as if trying to pull down the sun. Every evening, my mother rubbed my back while I nursed her, humming lullabies I hadn't heard since my own childhood. My father made pepper soup on Sundays and joked that he was learning how to fold baby clothes like a military operation. We had become a small unit again, a family not built on wedding photos and champagne toasts, but on truth, healing, and love that expected nothing in return. One evening, Udu arrived with 2 shopping bags full of toys and onesies. I know, she said, waving off my protest before I could make it. "You said no more gifts, but I couldn't resist. Look at this duck." She held up a yellow onesie with a tiny bill stitched on the hood. "You're gonna spoil her," I said, laughing. "She deserves it. So do you." She paused, looking down at Amare nestled in my arms. "Have you decided what to name her officially?" I nodded. "Amare," Udu smiled. "God's grace. That's exactly what she is." That night, the first contraction had arrived. It was sharp, deep, and final. Within minutes, I was being helped into the car, Amare's name already written on my lips, the future pulling me forward faster than I could catch my breath. And now she was here, sleeping soundly in her crib while the world outside continued to heal in its own messy way. 2 weeks later, I was invited to speak at a university women's conference. It felt surreal, standing on a polished stage, microphone in hand, with Amare strapped to my chest in a soft sling, her head resting just beneath my collarbone. The room was packed. Students, professors, mothers, even a few fathers. I looked out at them and took a deep breath. "My name is Celeste Martin," I began. "I was supposed to be someone's wife, but I chose to be something better, myself." They leaned in, every word felt like a thread stitching me back together. I was pregnant, in love, and blind, but I saw the truth in time and I walked away. That walk changed everything. I paused. "Walking away doesn't make you weak. It means you understand your worth. Never be afraid to leave a place where you're not honored." They stood, applauded, cried, shouted my name. Somewhere I imagined Darius watching through a screen, alone in his one-room apartment, no office, no staff, no company logo, just regret and silence. Maybe he understood now, maybe not. Either way, I no longer needed his apology. At home, I lay beside Amare, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. I picked up my phone and opened my blog inbox. Over 400 unread messages. I scrolled, reading notes from strangers, women, even teenagers who had seen the video or read my posts. One message stopped me cold. "Dear Celeste, last month I was going to end my life. Then I saw your video. You made me believe I mattered. I chose to stay. Thank you." I put the phone down slowly and let the tears come, not from pain, but from knowing that my worst moment had become someone else's miracle. I kissed Amare's forehead and whispered, "You saved me, my child, and now I will spend my life saving others." The moonlight spilled across the room, touching everything gently. My laptop, my books, the soft curve of Amare's cheek. I lay back, feeling something I hadn't in a long time. Not grief, not anger, not pride, but purpose. It had taken everything to walk away, and now it would take everything to build what came after. But I was ready. Because sometimes the strongest woman in the room isn't the one in white lace walking toward the altar. She's the one walking away from it. Head high, heart open, arms cradling a new beginning. Thank you, truly, for staying with me until the very end of this story. If you're still here, it means something inside you listened closely, maybe even quietly reflected on your own journey. This wasn't just a story about betrayal or heartbreak. It was about choosing dignity over tradition, truth over illusion, and courage over silence. Celeste walked away not because she was broken, but because she knew her worth. And that is the lesson we all must carry. You are never too far gone to choose yourself. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is walk away from what was never meant for us and build something better with the pieces. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city, your country, your corner of the world down in the comments. Let's see how far these stories of strength can reach. And if this touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another powerful story like this one. Because somewhere, someone out there is still learning how to walk away, and you just might be the voice that helps them take the first step.